So what am I looking forward to in terms of next gen? In terms of the next generation of games that are going to be coming out for these current gen platform consoles and shit? What am I most excited for? The only thing you can really care, the only thing I can personally really care for, uh, load times. I want to say the first thing that I would be excited for in next gen, which I've already seen, is probably just going to be load times. There are some games that have ridiculous load times, like insane. I would have thought this was a PS2 game, or running this game on like fucking Windows 95 back in the day or some shit on a sluggish ass computer because you got viruses and trojans and shit. Like honestly, man, for me, I want to say the load times are not the most important thing about the next generation of consoles, but I think in terms of like keeping the gameplay fresh. There are some games that have load times that are very jarring, and there are some games that have load times that are hidden inside the game. Like in a moment where, let's say, you're going down an elevator or there's a cutscene because it's technically loading, those things are acceptable. But a lot of developers have to do so much to try to hide the fact that they have to load this section of the game or this section of the map or whatever it is. And I can understand how that can be a bit of a impedance on getting an actual feel for the entire game itself. But yeah, in my opinion, honestly, load times is probably one of the things that I would say are is going to be my number one pick for next gen. In terms of like everything else, let's see. Graphic wise, dude, I don't know what everyone's expectations are in terms of graphics, but I just wish everyone understands that fully you can't have the graphic fidelity of real life in video games, and I think a lot of people try to aim for that, and that's where they get the concept of good graphics in a game really really fucked up, because there are people who just don't understand the difference between graphics in a video game versus the art style of a video game. I'll give you a good example. Ori and the Will of the Wisp, as well as like the first game and the second game and everything. That game's art style is incredible. It has an amazing art style. Those graphics can be made in just about any type of environment on any console set. You can have those type of graphics, but the art style of Ori, as far as the environment that it's actually driven in, like it doesn't take much to make those graphics and to make that flash background move the way that it does. But the particular art style that the director was going for when they were developing the game, the art style of the game never really matters to me. In terms of the actual graphics of the game, in terms of seeing like a person's skin tone, as well as the flesh, as well as the freaking blackheads in their skin, as well as the facial expressions, as well as just how the bridge of the nose connects to the bottom. I'm sorry, how the bridge of the nose connects to like the top of the mouth, and how the eyes of the character don't protrude out of the face, but they look fairly realistic to where that person's looking at you, even when it blinks and stuff like that. I'm talking about like the textures on rocks not looking like copy paste cutouts as you go further through the game. I'm talking about the skybox of the game having a little bit more crispness to it rather than having such a low resolution in the background. If you play certain RPG games, you know what I'm talking about. But in terms of actual graphics, I don't really care for seeing the reflection of water in terms of ray tracing and stuff like that. Reflections don't necessarily concern me because honestly, I feel like reflections and lighting in games if you have static lighting in games that's done well enough, you don't necessarily notice it. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a good example of a game that has incredible lighting, and that was Demon Souls on PS5. Demon Souls on PS5 had, in like I said before, just incredible lighting. And I mean, like, the light isn't in a fixed location. The light actually moves with the light, light reflects and bounces off of surfaces. It reflects and bounces off of surfaces in a way that is so fucking realistic, and realistic is the only word that I can use, that I would have to say, yeah, honestly, there are certain things when it comes to my graphics that I care for, but only when it actually makes the game, like, I want to say, impactful. Only when it helps immerse me inside the game. Certain games, however, like, let's be real, shooters, you don't have the time to notice the graphic fidelity in shooters because you're too busy dealing with all the gameplay moments that's in between. You don't have time to notice the things that are going on inside of shooters, with the exception of shooters that have destructible environments and stuff like that. If you have a game that has destructible environments, but the environments look amazing as they're being broken down and stuff like that, that is the type of stuff that I would care for naturally. But in terms of, like I said, reflections and stuff like that, look, man, as someone who's played classic PS1 games, the way a game looks, honestly, does not affect how I'm going to play the game unless it is just overall just jarringly bad. Like, just jarringly bad. And I can't think of a game that gives me that example other than, like, ah I want to say a low fidelity game, like, let's say Fallout, or I would even argue the only game that I said, wow, this kind of looks very bad to me, this isn't the best graphics I've ever seen, is probably like Dishonored. Like, the first Dishonored, in my opinion, had, it was on a 360, so the graphics weren't necessarily all of that, but they were there. But you can see certain things when it's made in, like, Unreal Engine, the limit of what graphics can actually go to. But yeah, in terms of graphics, that is just me. If there was a third contender for what I want to see in next gen gaming, ah, I want to see some more complicated physics and mechanics inside of games. Like, I want to see the game doing some, like, I want to see the game running multiple things in the background and doing multiple things at a time. Like, I want the AI of a game to be very responsive to where you can have a very compelling AI as well as a very compelling background and movement. And how can I give a good example of this? Okay, Ghost of Tsushima has a lot of movement going on between the swaying of the grass and the flowing of the trees and the wind and all this other stuff. Like, there's a lot going on, as well as, like, the NPCs of the game have some actual, I don't know, intelligence and stuff like that. What I mean is, I just want next gen games to be able to load in those multiple things, to be able to push that limit of what we weren't able to do, as far as having a lot of shit on screen and a lot of stuff being rendered in the background all at the same time. I mean, when you have games like RPGs that kind of, based on the frame rate limit, because they have to load so much stuff in, the frame rate kind of dithers and it kind of has to jump up and down in between with certain stuff like that. But for the most part, I would say just an improvement on the overall quality of polish that we can give games. You know what I mean? Like, there are games that are coming out now that have, like, such polish in between the transitions of each movement, where the movements aren't necessarily stiff because you have the limitations of what that game is. Now, don't get me wrong, some games are literally made to have, like, a janky style movement, like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and stuff like that. but they're made purposely in a way so that it can actually stand the test of time going forward with certain games and everything like that. But moving forward, I would say I would like to just have a lot more complications in terms of the mechanics of what can be of what's being rendered in your face on screen, in terms of all the stuff that's going on off screen and all the crazy shit that you can do. And to have that stuff run, Jesus Christ, what was that? And to have that stuff run smoothly, I would say is my overall gripe of what I want to have in terms of next gen. Because I don't know, man. There are games that are out these days and they look amazing, but they always lack compelling AI that can do a lot of smart things, or they always lack like compelling, like the hit sparks of a game's animation. They will always lack something, and it's always because they kind of have to limit themselves to either the game has to look excessively good or the game has to play excessively good. We're going for one or two things, either looks or playability. And I would like to see a generation of games where we can finally have both of those combined into one, where a game can both look and play amazingly. Because so far, it's like you can only get one or the other. There's rarely ever a game that's going to hit both of those checkpoints and actually be a good game that stands the testament of time for its audience to love and to be able to hit the ground running with positive feedback. You know, like positive feedback. Ghost of Tsushima was a game that hit the ground running with nothing but positive feedback. And there are a lot of games that have come out this year that have hit the ground and they've had like some in between gripes and some things that people feel were just unnecessary or just like, a step back compared to what they were expecting. But yeah, that's all that about me. All I want, dude, is just some good. I don't care about graphics necessarily. Good fidelity on graphics, good rendering on what you can do mid game, as well as just some decent load times. Because in all honesty, dude, oh, fuck that shit. Man, you want to know what is my main thing that I want to have for next gen gaming? Hard drive size. We're not even going to talk about the actual console or the game itself. What I want for next gen is just the understanding of where we need to move forward with the controlling of the amount of space you have on your fucking hard drive. That's what I say we need to prioritize on more than fucking anything. I can understand that games are going to have to in certain ways get bigger because you got to load all those assets and you got to load the engine and all this other stuff, and then you got patches and all this other extra shit, and then you have your DLC. I can exclude all that, but man, we got to get something under control in terms of the amount of fucking internal or external space that we're able to fucking store our goddamn games or load our fucking files on, because it's going to just get ridiculously bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And luckily, with the option of having the Steam library games, they're fairly decent in size. You can have a ton of Steam library games on a hard drive. Well, a solid state drive. God forbid you're loading all those games on a hard drive. That would be so slow. But in terms of console players, man, if you're gonna do anything next gen, telling you right now, space. Hard hard disk space is a needed requirement. Fuck mega I'm sorry. I never thought we could get to that point where it's like, fuck gigabytes, because I still remember the days of storing gigabytes on floppy disks. Like floppy disks are amazing to me. I still would I'm sorry I don't have an A drive. I would still use an A drive if it permitted me to. if it honestly permitted me to, I would still use floppy disks. Floppy disks are OG for life. But in terms of the future going on, dude, we gotta have terabytes. There's no more of the conversation of gigabytes at all. We gotta have terabytes inside of our devices. Actually, inside of our devices. And hey, a cell phone with a terabyte in it, I'd sign me up. I wouldn't complain. Of course, it would be a little extra money, but if you're gonna pay, let's see, if you're gonna honestly pay, dude, the price that you're gonna pay for people who are buying PS4s that are being, sorry, PS5s that are being scalped right now, if you're gonna pay more than what the PS5 is worth, you better be paying for some extra hard drive space, because for people who aren't knowledgeable about this shit, yo, Xbox, I mean, whatever, both games are around like half $1,000, like $500. An external hard drive is gonna be like an extra $200 to $300. If you're gonna be doing anything along the lines of that, I swear to God, if they make a PS5 Pro or a fucking Xbox Series X Pro version that's like the size of a fucking actual mini fridge, the only difference that better be in that thing is the fucking hard drive space or the solid disk space. In terms of the future going on, that is what we want more than anything. I'm gonna tell you right now, there are people who are not gonna buy the PS5 immediately, but that's because they still have a shit ton of games that they're playing on their old gen. And because they're still playing those old games, dude, they're gonna have to move those old games to their newer gen, or they're gonna have to keep most of those games. But for the majority of the part, you have a huge game library, and you can barely fit 2 versions of Call of Duty on one hard drive now as is. Like, you can barely play your 2 favorite Call of Duties. Like, if you just want to throw back and go to Call of Duty, I mean Black Ops 2 or Modern Warfare 2, which is understandable because those were pretty good during its time. You can't. I mean, you can keep Warzone and play your old school games, but god damn, man, you gotta delete some stuff. If you're a guy like me who's doing YouTube and shit, you gotta delete some video files and a whole bunch of crap, a whole bunch of files inside of your hard drive space, solid disk space, sorry. And man, it just gets taxing. It really does. Honestly, when it comes to that, forget everything that I said in this video. Number one, what I want to see in terms of next gen, hard disk space. I meant solid disk space, but I'm used to saying hard drives because I used to work on computers for so long. But yeah, guys, that is it about me. Literally, that's like the 4 main things. We got to step it up on fucking hard disk space. If I got to delete another game off my PlayStation 4 just to download another game that is like only somewhat equally bigger in size, I don't know, man. We got to prioritize our hard drive space. Anyway, GG's, motherfuckers.